Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to talk about something that's quietly affecting millions of women, perhaps even the woman sitting next to you, or maybe you. The title of this talk might sound dramatic: Why 80% of Women Feel Emotionally Empty and What No One Is Telling You. But let me assure you, it's not an exaggeration. Now, before we get too far down the road, we need to stop and ask ourselves a sobering question. Why is this happening? Why is it that in a time when women seem to have more freedom, more opportunity, more autonomy than at any point in history, so many still feel emotionally empty? And I'm not talking about a bad day or a hard week. I'm talking about a deep, aching emptiness that doesn't go away. A hollow space in the soul that no amount of effort, distraction, or achievement can seem to fill. And while the world has 1,000 answers ready, therapy apps, yoga classes, shopping carts, or a fresh set of goals, there's one answer few are brave enough to say out loud. You've been sold a lie. You've been told that fulfillment comes through performance, that if you work hard enough, climb high enough, become successful enough, you'll finally feel full inside. That emotional contentment is on the other side of your next promotion, your next milestone, your next act of independence. But here's the reality, and it's a painful one. The ladder you're climbing is leaning against the wrong wall. This culture told you that you'd feel whole once you broke free from old ideas about marriage, motherhood, faith, femininity. It told you to push aside anything that made you feel dependent, anything that looked too traditional, too emotional, too fragile. So you did it. You became self-sufficient. You paid your own bills. You raised your voice. You built a life on your terms. And now, standing in the middle of everything you were told would make you happy, you feel completely alone. The world pushed you toward independence, but it never told you the cost. It never told you that chasing the image of a strong woman would sometimes require you to silence your own heart. That in becoming everything, you'd feel like nothing. It never told you that you'd lie awake at night wondering why success tastes so bitter and why freedom feels like exile. You see, the lie runs deeper than just one bad piece of advice. It's a redefinition of fulfillment itself. The world has taken the soul of a woman, designed for deep connection, for beauty, for spiritual richness, and told her that her worth lies in how much she does, how far she goes, and how well she hides her need for love. But you weren't created to be a machine. You weren't made to function without affection, without purpose, without a place to belong. That emptiness in your heart, that's not a flaw in you, it's a signal, a red flag waving from your soul, saying this life is not enough. And no, I don't mean you need to add one more thing to your calendar or one more achievement to your resume. I mean you need truth, and you need it desperately. And here's the truth the world will never admit. You were never meant to carry the weight of your own worth. You were never meant to be your own savior. You were not created to perform for approval or compete for love. You were meant to rest in it. You were meant to know without striving that you are loved, not for what you do, but for who you are. This emptiness, this hollowness inside so many women, it's not because they've failed. It's often because they've succeeded at the wrong things. They've climbed the mountain only to find it's made of sand. They've reached the top only to realize there's nothing up there but wind. You were created with a longing that no career, no compliment, no social media following can ever fill. You were made to be seen, known, cherished, not just by people, though that matters, but by the one who made you. Your soul is crying out for something eternal, and this culture keeps handing you something temporary. Your heart needs water, and you're being given dust. I'm not here to condemn you. I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to tell you what no one else will. This world does not care about the state of your soul. It will use you, praise you, distract you, and then leave you empty. And I don't care how strong you think you are, how organized your life looks, how successful you've become. You were never meant to do this alone. There is a reason why, even when everything looks fine, there's a quiet voice inside that says, There's a reason why you can be surrounded by people and still feel invisible. There's a reason why, even in the middle of a happy photo or a busy day, your heart still whispers, I'm tired of pretending. And maybe no one around you is saying it. Maybe everyone's too busy performing the same script, smiling, achieving, pushing, surviving. But today, let's stop the show. Let's take off the mask. Let's admit it. We were not made for a life of endless doing and never being. We were made for If 80% of women feel emotionally empty, that is not a personal failure. That is a cultural disaster. It is the symptom of a deeper lie, one that has severed us from truth, from connection, and from the only source of lasting peace. And the first step toward healing is not doing more. It's seeing clearly. It's recognizing that you've been chasing the wind and choosing today to turn back toward what is real, what is good, what is eternal, because there is something, someone who can fill the silence and once you've tasted that kind of peace, no lie in this world will satisfy you again. You see, the problem isn't always isolation, it's disconnection. There's a difference. You can be in a room full of people, you can laugh at the right moments, you can post 100 smiling pictures, and yet deep in your chest, you feel like no one actually sees you. You're surrounded, but you're still starving for real intimacy, real honesty, real love. And that's what no one wants to talk about. We live in a world that's noisy. It's full of constant motion, constant updates, constant access to one another, but so little true connection. Everyone is reachable, but no one is reached. We've replaced deep friendships with DMs, replaced soul conversations with shallow banter, and we wonder why our hearts feel like they're disappearing. And so many women, beautiful, strong, intelligent women, are emotionally running on empty because they're giving in relationships that are transactional. They're smiling while their souls are breaking. They're showing up, keeping things together, staying quiet, holding back the tears, because somewhere along the way, someone taught them that being too much will scare people off, that being emotional, being honest, being real will make them a burden. So instead of reaching out, they shrink back. Instead of being seen, they stay silent, and their hearts grow quiet, grow small, grow tired. Let me tell you something that may be hard to hear. You cannot thrive in shallow relationships. You were not made for surface level living. You were not made to be half known, half heard, or halfway loved. You were created for depth, for truth, for sacred connection. And if that's missing in your life, it doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. The world applauds busy women, efficient women. Women who can do it all, juggle it all, fix it all, and do it with a smile. But there's a different kind of strength no one claps for. The strength it takes to say I'm not okay. The strength to say I need. That's the kind of strength that terrifies this world, because it's raw, unfiltered, and inconvenient. But that kind of strength, honest strength, is where healing begins. The truth is, you weren't made to carry the burdens of life alone. You weren't made to bear heartache and grief in silence. You weren't made to hide your story so that others could feel more comfortable. And yet that's exactly what many of you have done, because you were afraid. Because you were told, maybe not in words, but in the way people responded to your vulnerability, that your emotions are too much, that your pain is too heavy, that your honesty is too raw. So instead of being real, you became polite, you became agreeable, you became someone people could depend on, even if it meant you could no longer depend on anyone. And while you were busy keeping everyone else from falling apart, your own soul quietly began to unravel. And I want to say something that may sound strange in a culture obsessed with independence and strength. You need people, you need friends who will cry with you, not just celebrate you. You need conversations that go deeper than, how are you, and stop pretending when the answer is fine. You need spaces where your soul can exhale, where you can say what you really think, how you really feel, and not be judged for it. And if you're listening to this right now thinking, I don't have that, then I want you to hear me. That's not your fault. This culture has done a terrible job of teaching people how to love each other. We've become masters of performance, but strangers to one another's hearts. We've made life about achievements and left the soul behind. But God did not create us for platforms. He created us for communion with Him and with one another. So many women are in marriages where they feel invisible. They serve, they support, they give, and yet they feel unknown. Others are in friend groups where everything is laughter and aesthetics, but no one talks about what's really going on inside. And some of you are doing life alone, entirely, because it feels safer to be lonely on your own terms than to be wounded by people who say they love you but don't know how to stay. This is what I want you to understand. Your desire to be known is not a weakness, it's a reflection of your design. You were made in the image of a relational God, a God who sees, who hears, who speaks, a God who doesn't just know what you do, but knows who you are. And if you're walking through life feeling emotionally disconnected, it's not because you're broken, it's because something in your life is out of alignment with your design. And I want to challenge you with something, not in condemnation, never in condemnation, but in truth. Have you let yourself be known? I don't mean the version of you people like, I mean the real you. Have you given anyone access stress, to your fears, your wounds, your insecurities? Or have you become so good at hiding that even you've forgotten where the truth is? There is no healing in hiding. There is no transformation in pretending. What you keep in the dark will rot. What you bring into the light can be redeemed, but the light only reaches what we uncover. And I know some of you have tried. You've opened up before. You've been honest and you were met with silence, or shame, or rejection. So now, the idea of trusting again feels impossible. I understand, but let me say this. Don't let the failures of people convince you that connection isn't worth it. Don't let the wounds of your past become the walls of your future, because you need more than company. You need communion. You need more than just not being alone. You need to be known, deeply, painfully, beautifully known. And yes, that kind of knowing will cost you. Vulnerability always does. But the alternative, a life where your soul is never seen, never heard, never loved for who it really is, that is a cost far greater. So if you're feeling emotionally empty, if your soul feels numb even while your calendar is full, if you're tired of being fine all the time, you're not alone. But don't stay there. Fight for deeper relationships. Fight to be known. Fight to build the kind of community that doesn't just admire your strength, but embraces your struggle. You see, we're living in an age of constant comparison. It's everywhere. It follows you from the moment you wake up to the moment your head hits the pillow. You open your phone and there it is, perfect homes, flawless bodies, smiling families, curated lives. It's a never-ending scroll of who you're not. And every image, every caption, every post whispers something into your soul. You're behind. You're not enough. Try harder. Be more. Now don't misunderstand me. There's nothing wrong with beauty. There's nothing wrong with wanting a peaceful home, a joyful family, or a meaningful life. The problem isn't desire, the problem is distortion. What's being presented to you isn't reality. It's a performance, it's a mask, it's a carefully edited highlight reel meant to convince you that someone else is living the life you should have. And deep down, your soul begins to ache, not because you're failing, but because you're being lied to again and again and again. Women today are under relentless pressure. Be thin, but not too thin. Be strong, but not too aggressive. Be soft, but not weak. Be independent, but not intimidating. Be successful, but always available. It's a moving target that you can never hit. And the more you try, the more exhausted you become, because you are constantly adjusting, performing, shaping yourself into a version of what the world says you should be. And that kind of living isn't living at all. It's soul death. And that's the danger. Overstimulation and comparison aren't just distractions, they're weapons. They dull the voice of truth inside of you. They numb your spiritual sensitivity. They drown out the quiet call of God saying, I love you, I see you, you are mine. But instead of hearing that voice, your mind is filled with noise, the noise of inadequacy, shame, envy, insecurity, and eventually you begin to believe the lie that your worth is based on how well you perform in this world's pageant of perfection. But you were never meant to live for likes. You were never meant to chase affirmation from strangers. You were never designed to wake up every day measuring yourself against someone else's life. That's not freedom, that's bondage. And yet so many women, even Christian women, are quietly enslaved, not to sin in the obvious sense, but to comparison, to performance, to public approval. And the result, a soul that feels empty, a heart that feels a life that feels like it's slipping through your fingers no matter how hard you try to keep up. And I want to say something hard, but necessary. This system is designed to break you. The pressure, the pace, the expectations, it's not meant to make you whole. It's meant to keep you distracted and discouraged. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you with obvious evil. If he can just keep you endlessly comparing yourself to everyone else. He doesn't need to drag you into darkness if he can just convince you to chase shadows all day long, shadows of success, shadows of beauty, shadows of worth. And what's worse, many of us have started to internalize this cycle. We don't just feel the pressure, we begin to place it on each other. We become so consumed with appearing okay, appearing strong, appearing successful, that we shame one another for being real, for being weak, for being tired. And so the cycle continues. Women living next to each other, worshiping next to each other, smiling next to each other, while dying inside, too afraid to say what they really feel. But I want to ask you today, what would happen if you stopped running? What if you silenced the noise? What if, just for a moment, you laid down the weight of comparison and performance? What if you believed, really believed, that your value doesn't increase when you succeed and it doesn't decrease when you fail? Because you need to know this, not just in your head but in your bones. Your worth is not found in your reflection, your resume, your followers, or your bank account. Your worth was established before you were born. It was declared by a God who knit you together in the secret place, who called you fearfully and wonderfully made, who set his love upon you not because of your performance, but because of his mercy. The question is not whether you're beautiful enough, smart enough, or successful enough. The real question is, do you know who you are without all the noise? Do you know who you are without the filters, without the accomplishments, without the comparison? Can you sit in the silence and say, I am enough because he is enough? This is not self-help. This is not about positive thinking or affirmations. This is about truth, deep, soul-liberating truth. Because the reason your heart feels so empty after scrolling for hours, the reason you feel hollow after another day of performing, is because your soul was created for something real, something eternal, something that cannot be digitized or measured or marketed. You were created for glory, not the kind that fades with trends, but the kind that is rooted in the character and presence of God. And if you keep feeding your soul with the glitter of this world, you will starve to death with a smile on your face. Because that's what this world does. It teaches you how to look alive while you die inside. So what's the answer? It's not to try harder. It's not to curate a better life. It's to return. Return to truth. Return to stillness. Return to the one who quiets your soul with his love, who rejoices over you with singing, who gives you a name that no one else can erase. It's to fix your eyes not on the highlight reels of this world, but on the one who bore your shame, your striving, your insecurity, and nailed it to a cross so you could be free. Because when you finally stop looking around and start looking up, when you stop comparing and start beholding, something inside you begins to heal, the emptiness starts to lift, the noise begins to fade, and in that quiet space, you find what you've been missing all along. Now we come to something deeper still, something most people will avoid because it's too painful, too uncomfortable, and too convicting. But if we're going to be honest, really honest, then we need to face it. We need to talk about broken trust, and not just broken trust with people, but the subtle, almost silent way that trust in God begins to erode in a woman's heart when life doesn't look like what she prayed for. Because for many women, the emotional emptiness they carry isn't just about unmet expectations from others. It's about unanswered prayers. It's about a quiet disappointment with God himself. And nobody wants to say that out loud because it feels wrong. It feels shameful. But deep down, many women, especially those who have walked faithfully, are quietly asking the question, God, where were you? Where were you when my marriage was falling apart? Where were you when I miscarried? When the diagnosis came? When the person I trusted most betrayed me? Where were you when I was begging you to change things, to fix it, to heal it, and nothing happened? I'm not talking about rebellion. I'm talking about heartbreak. I'm talking about the kind of grief that doesn't make you curse God, but makes you stop expecting anything from him. The kind of pain that makes you close your Bible, not because you hate God, but because you're too wounded to hope again. That's what's happening in the hearts of so many women. They're still going to church, still serving, still smiling, but deep inside there's a distance, a numbness, a quiet trembling fear that maybe God's promises are for everyone else, just not for them, and no one talks about that. Because good Christian women are supposed to be full of faith, full of joy, full of praise, and when you're not, the pressure to pretend becomes overwhelming. So you keep showing up, but not fully. You keep praying, but not boldly. You keep hoping, but only in the safe, small things. Because disappointment has taught you to lower your expectations, to protect your heart, to not ask for too much. But that's not faith. That's fear wearing a mask. And here's the tragic irony. The very one who can heal your brokenness is the one you've started pulling away from. Not out of anger, but out of despair, because you no longer trust that he's good, not fully, not when it comes to you. You believe he loves you, maybe in theory, but in your heart, it feels like he's distant, silent, absent. And if that's you, I want you to know, you're not alone. God is not offended by your sorrow. He is not threatened by your questions. He is not disappointed in your pain, but he is calling you, not to fake joy, not to force worship, but to bring him your truth, to come back to him, not with polished prayers and perfect theology, but with your tears, with your grief, with the part of your heart that stopped trusting him a long time ago. Because here's what no one tells you. The distance in your relationship with God didn't start with some big sin. It started with disappointment. It started with a moment where you felt like he didn't show up. And instead of wrestling with him in that moment, you buried it, you silenced, you kept moving, you survived, but you stopped believing that he would be good to you. And now you don't even realize it, but your prayers are smaller, your worship is quieter, your hope is cautious, because you've been hurt, not by his word, but by your interpretation of his silence. But what if his silence wasn't rejection? What if it was invitation? What if the unanswered prayer was not a punishment, but a deeper call to intimacy? What if the delay wasn't abandonment, but preparation? What if instead of walking away, you dared to lean in, even with your pain? You see, emotional emptiness doesn't always come from the absence of love. Sometimes it comes from the absence of trust. And when we stop trusting God, when we start managing our expectations with him like we do with people, we lose the ability to rest in his presence. We approach him like a business deal, not a father. We bring him our best behavior, not our brokenness. And as a result, our souls grow dry, weary, and detached. But that's not the relationship God wants with you. He doesn't just want your loyalty. He wants your heart, all of it, even the confused, doubting, hurting parts. He wants you to trust him enough to say, I don't understand you, but I won't leave you. I'm hurting, but I'm staying. Because true intimacy with God is not built in mountaintop moments. It's built in the valley. When everything in you wants to run, but you choose to remain. When everything in you wants to close off, but you choose to open up. That's when trust is forged. That's when the emotional walls begin to fall. That's when healing begins. Not with answers, but with honesty. And I want you to hear this. The God who created you is not fragile. He can handle your questions. He can handle your heartbreak. He can handle your story. But he cannot heal what you won't bring to him. He cannot redeem what you keep locked away. And so many of you are walking around with a divided heart, half in and half out, because you've been too afraid to trust him with your full self. But that's where real freedom is. Not in getting everything you prayed for, but in trusting him when you do. Not in a perfect life, but in a surrendered heart. Because when you trust God, not just with your victories, but with your wounds, when you give him your disappointments, your bitterness, your shattered dreams, he doesn't turn away. He leans in, and he begins to restore the parts of you that no one else sees. And I don't say this lightly. I say it with a trembling heart, because I know it's not easy. I know some of you have prayed for years and still haven't seen the breakthrough. I know some of you have cried until there were no more tears. I know some of you have been faithful and still feel forgotten. But I also know this. God sees, God hears, God remembers, and his silence is never the end of the story. So come back to him. Not when you've figured it all out. Come back to him now, just as you are. Let him have the honest, raw, unfiltered version of you. Because only that version can be healed, only that version can be made whole, and only that version can finally rest. What no one's telling you is that much of this emptiness comes not from doing too little, but from doing too much for too long without ever being allowed to collapse into someone else's strength. Women have been taught, sometimes subtly and sometimes loudly, that they are supposed to have it all together, that weakness is a liability, that their emotions are something to manage, suppress, or apologize for, that they can be godly if they're also composed, kind, supportive, and constantly available. So you pour yourself out day after day, thinking that's what faithfulness looks like. And on the surface, maybe everything appears fine. The meals get made, the emails get answered, the kids get tucked in. You show up to small group, to church, to appointments, but inside there's a growing void. You don't feel seen, you don't feel safe, you don't feel like anyone is holding you. And that's the thing, the world
will applaud your strength while quietly watching you bleed. It will celebrate your ability to handle pressure while never asking what it's costing your soul. And that's how we end up with so many women smiling on the outside while suffocating on the inside, emotionally hollow, not because they're failing, but because they're trying too hard to never fail. What's worse is that many women have internalized the lie that if they break down, they are less spiritual, that if they ask for help, they are less faithful, that if they speak up about the exhaustion, the emotional fatigue, the silent resentment growing in their chest, they are somehow weak in their walk with God. And I want to say with all the urgency in my heart, that is not biblical. That is not what God asks of you. That is not what freedom looks like. You were not created to be the savior. You were not designed to hold everyone together. That role was never yours to begin with. And yet many women carry the crushing weight of being everything to everyone, and they're wondering why they feel so empty. But let me tell you something, and I hope you hear it clearly. You are not loved for what you produce. You are not valued for how well you perform. You are not accepted because you held it all together. You are loved. You are valued. You are accepted because you belong to Him, even on the days when everything is falling apart. And that's the truth that begins to heal. That's the truth that begins to lift the weight. When you start to realize that God never called you to be the hero, He called you to be His. He called you to be dependent, not perfect. He called you to come to Him, not when you're strong and stable and polished, but when you're tired, when you're sobbing into a pillow in the middle of the night, wondering if anyone sees how hard you're trying. He sees, and not only does He see, He invites, "Come to me all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." He didn't say all who are managing it well. He said weary. He said heavy laden. And some of you have been wearing that burden for so long that you don't even remember what rest feels like anymore. But here's the challenge. To receive that rest, you have to stop performing. You have to stop pretending. You have to let go of the identity that's built on being capable, reliable, unshakable, because God can't meet the version of you that's fake. He can only meet you, the real you, the broken, exhausted, trying to hold it together you. That's who He came for. That's who He strengthens. That's who He loves. And this is where many of us struggle. We don't know how to need. We don't know how to ask for help. We've trained ourselves to think that needing something, needing comfort, needing support, needing presence is somehow unspiritual. But dependency on God is not weakness. It is worship. It is acknowledging that we are dust and He is breath, that we are vessels and He is the filling. You see, emotional emptiness isn't just about what's missing from your environment. It's about what you're not allowing yourself to receive. You give, and you give, and you give, but you never receive. Not because God isn't offering, but because you've convinced yourself that receiving is selfish, that rest is indulgent, that slowing down is failure, and so your soul stays parched, even as your schedule stays. But that's not godliness. That's burnout dressed in religion. That's not fruit. That's fatigue. And what's needed is not another to-do list, not another sermon about trying harder. What's needed is the courage to be still, the humility to let yourself be ministered to, the willingness to say, "I'm not okay, and that's okay, because I have a God who is." There's something profoundly healing about laying your burden and refusing to pick it back up again. There's something freeing about saying, "I don't have to hold this all together because I know the one who does." That's where the emptiness begins to fill, not with more tasks or more titles, but with truth. The truth that your identity is not in your strength, but in your surrender. And I want to say this directly. If you're carrying more than you were meant to carry, let it go. Stop dragging around the weight of perfection. Stop trying to save everyone. Stop hiding your pain under a polished exterior. You are allowed to be human. You are allowed to have limits. You are allowed to need, because only when you admit your need can you truly encounter the sufficiency of Christ. Only when you confess your weariness can you receive His rest. And only when you stop pretending to be enough do you discover the one who truly is. So stop carrying what was never yours.